So here's where the textbook has you look at Europe and America in the early 20th century to understand the political, the social, the historical context. This is always critical for art history, perhaps especially so in this period, because they're going to talk about how there is, in the first 20 years of the 20th century, there are momentous achievements and momentous disasters, namely World War I. So you'll read their discussion, and I think they do a very skillful job. They amass a number of critical facts to give you perspective. But I want to take a slightly different slant on it, because they start out, look at how they construct their narrative. They start out with the two most traumatic and horrific events of the 20th century, the World Wars, the first World Wars. So I understand why they want to start there. At the same time, starting there obscures the fact that from 1900 to 1915, no one could imagine those world wars coming. So we have to kind of, in this module where we cover 1900 to 1915, try to put ourselves in the minds of those who were encountering new technologies and ideas, unaware of the violence to come. So for people living around 1900, the 20th century begins with a cascade of thrilling new forms of technology. Imagine being a person in 1903 who never imagined flying in an airplane, and you read about the Wright brothers flying machine. Here's the photograph of them, the historical photograph. So within 6 short years, airplane technology will allow a pilot named Blériot to cross the Atlantic. And so artists at this time are going to begin to celebrate how these technologies are transforming space, time, and perception. They're going to be working on creating a new visual language for that. So basically, people at the time feel as if they're living in a new kind of world, and they will talk about becoming new men and new women. Those phrases, the new man, the new woman, will be very important cultural touchstones that artists will be thinking about. So people like Robert Delaunay are creating an artistic vision of space and time freed from the constraints of gravity. Look at the sense of floating perception, the use of the propeller form to create circles, to kind of convey movement and flight itself. Delaunay is celebrating with these glorious colors this transformation of consciousness. He does not yet know that those same planes will soon be used by Hitler, Franco, and Mussolini to rain bombs down on cities across Europe in an Armageddon of mass killing. In the same way, the first decade of the 20th century brings the automobile with its thrill of speed, making it possible to shrink distances that had imposed natural limits on human activity. It wouldn't be until the 1980s and 1990s that the consequences of using gasoline to power those automobiles would be discovered to be the production of excess carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, disturbing our climate homeostasis, and now climate change. I stress these points because in both art and life, the early 20th century was experienced by people as a time of breakthroughs that were shocking, thrilling, and not yet fully understood. The great historian Eric Hobsbawm defines the 20th century as the age of extremes. So we can consider some of the innovations that changed how we understand the world in very extreme ways. There's Einstein's famous equation written in his handwritten notes with crossouts, E equals mc squared. Energy equals mass times the constant squared. So between 1900 and 1905, look at this waterfall of paradigm shifting investigation of the physical structures of the universe. You get quantum mechanics upending Newtonian physics. You get Einstein in 1 year, 1905, having all of these insights about light having a dual nature, both a wave and a particle, publishing his special theory of relativity, formulating E equals mass times the constant squared. Now, ordinary people, including us, may not understand all of that. But we should know that that ordinary people at the time were very aware that the kind of through line of these sophisticated equations had to do with the idea of a universe that is much more dynamic, uncertain, and complex than had previously been understood. The idea that measurements depend on the velocity of the observers. Things are not simple mechanical patterns, that space can contract and time can expand. Artists will absolutely be very curious about this. And here we have a photo of the cover of the first edition of Professor Dr. Sigmund Freud in Vienna, publishing three essays on the theory of sexuality, basically charting a new discipline of psychoanalysis dedicated to studying the human mind. For Freud, this is a mind that is a realm of conflicts and instinctual drives, involving sexuality, the death drive, as he termed it, the pleasure principle, the ego, and the id. Freud was one of these innovators who, in the realm of psychoanalysis, taking sexuality out of religious morality, which emphasizes prohibitions, and into the realm of scientific investigation, emphasizing natural drives. On a more mundane level, photography has now advanced that a company formed named Kodak can start to advertise a camera that's widely available to amateurs, where anyone can buy it, and as this advertisement for the camera states, you press the button, we do the rest. You just press the button and you send the film to the Kodak film developing lab, and now image making is in the hands of the masses. We get to the beginning of mass culture. We also get this snapshot aesthetic. Look at this delightful anonymous photograph. These people are walking in the wind and holding on to their hats. The idea of capturing an instant of time is available widely and in a new way. We also get the beginnings of cinema. As photographic technology has sped up, the possibility of using film to create moving images has been developed, and you get early cinematography. Here's an advertisement that you can go see the Lumiere brothers, who are going to give you a film experience, which is basically a train coming towards you. Because movement and speed are so interesting in this time period. The great British writer Virginia Woolf summed up the consciousness of the time when she said, on or about 1910, human nature changed. In this new age of extremes, as she was living it, she saw human consciousness becoming radically different from what it had been. The first ones to chart these new forms of consciousness were the writers and the artists, as in this Picasso, which is not like any artwork made before. This is a little bit of paint, but it's mostly made out of cut-up newspaper strips, cut-out forms, flat cut-out shapes, and some circular shapes and triangular shapes that evoke a bottle. And you know that because there's a label that says Suze, which is a mass-produced alcohol in France, and then bits of wallpaper as if evoking a setting. This is synthetic cubism, as it will be called, and it is absolutely a changed consciousness of art and life. So as we study artworks like Picasso's or like this one by Kandinsky, think of the artists as being like the physicists and psychologists. The artists are also taking the mandate to innovate to new extremes. They are creating and they are responding to this age of extremes.